Warning. Extinction event imminent. The galactic barrier is failing.
We repeat, the barrier.
The transmission arrived at the Galactic Conclave at 0300 Standard Time. A single, unencrypted signal from a Class 7 backwater world orbiting a yellow dwarf star in the Orion Arm. Most council members didn't even bother to wake up for it. Ambassador Vethera of the Cylindri Collective read the summary over her morning nutrient infusion and set it aside. Humans, always so dramatic, always so convinced that their few centuries of interstellar travel gave them insight the elder races had spent millennia earning. The message was simple, blunt, characteristically human. We have detected a pattern in the collapse of Sector 9. This is not random. Something is hunting. We recommend immediate evacuation of border systems and coordinated military response. We can provide strategic analysis upon request. Admiral Yun Sera, Earth Unified Defense Command. Vethera forwarded it to the low-priority queue. She would regret that for the rest of her life. The first time humanity tried to warn the galaxy, it was dismissed as paranoia. It had been Admiral Yun Sera herself who first noticed the pattern 18 months before the Conclave received that transmission. She'd been reviewing deep space telemetry from the outer relay stations. Routine work, the kind that junior officers usually handled, when something snagged her attention like a fishhook through calm water. 11 colony worlds in Sector 9 had gone silent over a span of 4 years. Not destroyed, not invaded in any conventional sense. Silent. Communications cut. Ships that entered never returned. No debris fields. No distress signals. Just absence, spreading from system to system in a slow, deliberate arc. Yin had grown up in Busan, South Korea, in a family of fishermen. Her grandfather used to say that the most dangerous thing in the ocean wasn't the storm. It was the calm that came before something large moved beneath the surface. Sector 9 felt like that kind of calm. She submitted her analysis up the chain. It came back stamped, insufficient evidence, likely equipment cascades. She resubmitted with additional data. It came back again, under review. She escalated to Admiral General Petrov, who listened carefully, nodded twice, and told her she was probably on to something before reassigning her to a diplomatic escort mission for 3 months. By the time she returned, 2 more systems had gone silent. Yin stopped asking for permission and started building a team. They called themselves the Watchers, though the name was unofficial and their funding was technically reallocated from a sensor maintenance budget that nobody had audited in 6 years. Lieutenant Commander Deo Okonkwo handled the data architecture. Dr. Priya Mehta ran threat modeling. Sergeant First Class Tomas Reyes, who had no business being in an intelligence cell but understood systems the way musicians understood sound, built them an algorithm that could find signal in silence. And silence, it turned out, was exactly what they were dealing with. It's not destroying them, Priya said one night, projecting a holographic star chart across the cramped walls of their requisition supply bay. The missing systems glowed red. The surrounding ones pulsed a dim, anxious amber. There's no energy signature consistent with weapons fire. No radiation bloom. No shockwave propagation. Then what? Deo asked. Priya hesitated. In her years of threat modeling, she had learned to hesitate before saying the things that sounded insane. It's absorbing them. Whatever this is, it doesn't conquer. It doesn't destroy. It consumes. It moves in, and the system just stops being there in any meaningful sense. The room was quiet for a long moment. How long before it reaches inhabited conclave space? Yin asked. Tomas pulled up his projection. At current rate of expansion, 14 months before it hits the Cylindri border stations. 18 before it reaches the Cylindri homeworld. Yin nodded slowly. And if it accelerates? Then we're measuring in weeks, not months. She sent the transmission to the Galactic Conclave the following morning. The Conclave's dismissal was not cruel. That almost made it worse. They were polite about it. The response, when it eventually came 11 days later, was a masterwork of diplomatic condescension. The elder races expressed their appreciation for humanity's enthusiasm and their commendable vigilance. while gently noting that humanity had only been a conclave member for 230 years and perhaps lacked the contextual framework to interpret deep space phenomena with the nuance that such matters required. Yin read the message twice. Then she set it down, walked to the window of her office aboard EFS Resolute, and looked out at the stars. Contextual framework, she said quietly. Tomas appeared in the doorway. They said no. They said no with adjectives. He leaned against the frame. So, what do we do? Yin turned from the window. Her expression had settled into something that people who knew her recognized as the calm before significant action. We go look at it ourselves. What they found in Sector 9 would feature in humanity's history books for as long as humanity had history books. EFS Resolute and her 2 escort vessels dropped out of FDL at the edge of the Vokith system, one of the last confirmed silent zones, and immediately every instrument aboard went strange. Not broken. Strange. The readings were too clean. No stellar wind. No radiation. No cosmic background noise. The star was still there, burning yellow-white against the black, but it burned in a kind of terrible stillness, like a candle flame inside a sealed jar. I'm not reading any planets, Lieutenant Mara-chan said from the navigation console, her voice careful and controlled. The mass signatures are gone. The star is there, but the system is empty, Yin said. Not destroyed. Empty. As though the planets had simply been removed. As though something had reached into the system and taken what it wanted, leaving only the star behind as evidence that something had once existed here. Then Tomas's console screamed. Contact, he said. Large. Very large. It's, Commander, it's inside the system. It was inside the whole time. It was hiding behind the stellar mass. The thing that came around the star was not a ship. It was not a weapon. It was not anything that had a name in any language you knew. It was vast and dark and moved with the slow, terrible patience of a glacier. It had no discernible geometry. It folded and unfolded itself as it moved, surfaces that should not have been surfaces catching the starlight in ways that made the human eye flinch away. It was enormous. It was older than the star it had been hiding behind. Yun's instruments told her it was 3,000 kilometers across, and every one of those kilometers was alive in some fashion that her sensors couldn't properly categorize. It looked at Resolute. You knew it looked at them because every human being on the ship felt it simultaneously, a pressure behind the eyes, a ringing in the ears, a sudden and absolute certainty that something ancient and vast and profoundly hungry had just noticed them. All hands, Yun said, her voice steady, battle stations. Mara, I need a firing solution on that things. Commander. Tomas's voice was strange. It's transmitting. The translation software took 11 seconds. What returned was not words exactly. It was more like impression. Like the galaxy itself offering a sentiment. You are small. You have been warned before. This space is being reclaimed. Your kind may leave, or your kind may be incorporated. The choice is brief. Yin stared at the message for 3 full seconds. Then she opened a channel to the Conclave's emergency frequency, the one reserved for existential threats, the one that interrupted every communication system simultaneously across 40 star systems, and she broadcast everything. Every reading, every scan, the transmission, the empty system, the thing turning slowly toward them against the starlight. This is Admiral Yun Sera, she said. We found it. We're looking at it right now. It consumed the Vokith system. It is 3,000 kilometers across, and it is talking to us. We are transmitting all data in real time. I am formally requesting immediate military response and conclave-wide emergency mobilization. And I want whoever put my first report in the low-priority queue to know. She paused, watching the thing move, vast and unhurried. You had 14 months. You chose not to use them. She closed the channel. Tomas, she said, how much of this thing's surface structure can we map with active scanning before it decides we're more annoying than interesting? He pulled up his console. Despite everything, despite the cold sweat running down his back and the way his hands weren't quite steady, his voice carried a kind of wild professional focus. Running full, deep penetration scans now. We got maybe 4 minutes before it closes the range. Then we have 4 minutes. Use every second. They jumped out of the system 40 seconds before the thing reached them. They jumped out with 11 terabytes of the most important sensor data in the history of galactic civilization. The Conclave woke up. That is perhaps the most remarkable part of the story. Not that the elder races finally listened, but how fast they moved once they understood they had no choice. The Cylindri Collective, whose ambassador had filed humanity's warning under low priority, deployed their full war fleet within 72 hours. The Cylindri hive mind, ancient, calculating, famously slow to consensus, reached emergency agreement in 4 days. The Vorn Ascendancy, who had not mobilized for war in 800 years, activated reserves that humanity hadn't even known existed. And at the center of all of it, coordinating, translating, providing the strategic analysis they had offered months ago and been refused, were the humans. Because the humans had done something in those lost 14 months that no one else had thought to do. They had studied it. Priya's threat modeling, Tomas's pattern algorithm, the data from Resolute. All of it fed into the most comprehensive analysis ever conducted on an unknown entity, and what came out was not a certainty. It was never a certainty, but it was a shape. The thing moved in arcs. It had preferences. It avoided certain stellar types. It paused after large absorptions. It was not, Priya concluded with the careful precision of someone who understood the weight of what they were saying, invincible. It's never encountered organized resistance, she told the Conclave Emergency Assembly, standing before 40 alien delegations in a chamber that had never seen a human speaker at its center podium. Every civilization it's met either ran or was absorbed before they understood what they were facing. It hasn't adapted because it's never needed to, but it's also never encountered a species that had 14 months' notice and spent them building a weapon. The Conclave chamber was silent. "We built one," Priya said. The Battle of the Cylindri Threshold lasted 9 hours. History would record the names of every ship that fought there. Conclave vessels, hive mind swarms, Vorn Ascendancy behemoths. But the weapon that ended it, the device that found the resonance frequency of the entity's absorption process and turned it back on itself. The weapon that made the thing that had devoured 12 star systems stop and retreat for the first time in its existence. That weapon had been built in a supply bay on EFS Resolute by a sergeant who had no business being in it. Intelligence cell. Tomas watched it work from the bridge. He didn't say anything for a long time. "My grandfather was a mechanic," he finally said. "In Guadalajara, he used to say that every machine has a frequency it can't survive. You just have to find it." Yun stood beside him, watching the thing, diminished now, reduced, pulling back into the dark between stars. "Think it'll come back?" she asked. "Probably," he said. "But next time we'll have the data." She almost smiled. "Next time, they'll listen before we do." The formal apology from the Galactic Conclave arrived 6 weeks later. It was 47 pages long and written in language so elaborately diplomatic that it took 3 translation passes to confirm it was, in fact, an apology. Ambassador Vethera of the Cylindri Collective delivered it in person, in the Great Hall of the United Earth Assembly in Geneva, before a live audience of 4 billion humans and a watching galaxy. Yin received it in her dress uniform, stood at attention, and said, "Thank you." Afterward, a journalist asked her what she had been thinking when the entity first turned toward Resolute, when she understood for the first time the true scale of what she was facing. She was quiet for a moment. "I was thinking about my grandfather," she said. "He used to say you could always tell the size of a wave by how far back the ocean pulled first." She looked past the journalist, past the cameras, past the crowd, toward the sky. "The ocean pulled back a long time ago. We just happen to be watching the waterline. The stars are quiet tonight, but somewhere in the dark between them, something ancient and patient is moving. And this time, for the first time in its long, consuming history, it knows that something is watching back."